The night shift at the Harmon County Records Building starts at 10 and ends at 6, and if you've done it long enough, you stop noticing the quiet. I had done it long enough. 3 years was the same lobby, the same hum of the HVAC, the same scratched linoleum under the fluorescent wash. Most nights I signed in two or three visitors, researchers, mostly, or attorneys pulling old deed filings, and then I was alone with the cart of logbooks and the low sound of the building settling around me. I didn't mind. The hours were the point. 6 in the morning, I was free. By 7:15, I was standing at the corner of Prospect and Dell, and Anya was coming down the front steps with her backpack, listing sideways the way it always did, and I straightened it while she complained that I was fussing, and then I walked her the 4 blocks to school. That was the whole calculation. Night shift, 6 o'clock, Prospect and Dell. Everything else was arranged around that. I had worked other jobs. 19 years in military intelligence, analyst, not field, though the distinction blurred more than once. I was good at sitting still and reading patterns other people missed. I retired at 43, came back to this city, because Anya's mother had moved back to be near her parents, and Anya was 7 and needed both of us within driving distance of each other. I found the records job inside of a month. It paid less than a quarter of what I'd made before. I took it without thinking twice. The thing about a quiet life is that it gives you time to remember, and there was one memory I kept returning to more than any other, not because it troubled me, but because it had always seemed to me like the cleanest thing I'd ever done. 19 years ago, I was still in uniform. Between postings, visiting a cousin in a town called Greer Ford, about 40 miles east of here. There was a fire at the Callaway Precision Components plant on the south edge of town. A press room fire started from a hydraulic leak near one of the stamping machines. I was driving past when I saw the smoke and pulled over. By the time the trucks arrived, I had already gone in twice. The second time I came back out, I had a man over my shoulder, 50, heavyset, soot black across his face and hands, a deep burn across his right forearm where he'd shielded himself from a falling press guard. He was conscious. He kept saying a name, his son's name, I thought, though I couldn't make it out through the noise. I set him down on the grass at the edge of the lot. A paramedic pushed past me. I stepped back, and then I kept stepping back because there were cameras and reporters arriving, and I had a security clearance to protect and no desire to be on the news. I found my car, drove to my cousin's house, and never said a word about it to anyone. Not even Anya, years later when she was old enough to understand. I didn't know his name. I didn't know it until the night a young man came to the records window at 11:43 on a Tuesday in November, 3 years into my night shift, with a briefcase and a woman in a charcoal suit behind him, who I recognized as an attorney by the way she stood. He was maybe 32, dark circles under sharp eyes. He slid a records request across the counter, original articles of incorporation, Callaway Precision Components, filed 1987, along with any amendments and co-signatory filings through 1993. He said his name was Marcus Callaway. I typed in the request and went to pull the physical files. The system flagged 2 boxes, and I brought them both to the reading room. While he went through the folders, I went back to my station and stood there. I knew the name Callaway Precision from the county records. It was a fixture in the aerospace supply chain, a family-owned manufacturer that had expanded from stamping and casting into precision avionics components. I hadn't connected the name to the fire, not until I heard him say it aloud. Then the math ran itself in the back of my mind, and I stood very still behind the counter while it finished. The attorney came to the window 20 minutes later. She was holding a photocopy of a document from the 1993 amendment filing. She laid it flat on the counter and tapped one line with her fingernail. "Are you familiar with the name Devlin Cross?" she said. I looked at the line. My own signature, 19 years younger, in the handwriting I'd had before my wrist was injured. "That's my name," I said. She blinked. Behind her, Marcus Callaway looked up from the table. He came to the window slowly, the way people move when they're trying not to frighten something off. He was holding the document. He set it on the counter and looked at me the way his attorney had. That particular focused stillness that means someone is recalculating. "You signed as a silent cosigner on the original operating loan," he said. "In 1993, my father amended the articles to include a co-signatory consent clause. Any forced transfer of controlling interest requires written consent from this cosigner." He paused. "We've been trying to find you for 6 weeks." I looked at the document. The date was March 1993, 4 months after the fire in Greer Ford. Edmund Callaway had found me. I didn't know how. I had never given him my name. But he had found me, tracked me through whatever channels a determined man could find, and instead of calling to thank me, he had written me into the legal architecture of his company. A silent cosigner. Not a shareholder, not a partner, just a name on a clause that said, this transfer requires his agreement. He hadn't even told me. He had simply trusted that if the day came, I would be findable, and I would do the right thing. I thought about Edmund Calloway in the grass at the edge of the lot, saying his son's name through the noise of the fire trucks. What's happening to the company? I said. Marcus told me. His father had died 14 months ago. Edmund had left him the company outright, but the board included 3 outside directors who had been maneuvering for 2 years to force a sale to a larger defense contractor, a company called Steelvance Group, run by a named Harlan Steele, who sat on the board and had been quietly buying up debt instruments tied to the Calloway operating accounts. The plan was to trigger a technical default, force a receivership, and acquire the assets at a fraction of value. The workforce, 412 people, most of them lifers, would be absorbed or cut. The family name would be gone inside of 18 months. The co-signer clause was the only thing standing between Steele and the transfer. Without my written consent, the forced conveyance was void under the original articles. Steele's attorneys had argued the clause was a legal artifact, unenforceable, superseded by subsequent amendments. Marcus's attorneys disagreed, but the whole argument was moot if I couldn't be found. I've been found, I said. The attorney started to say something about scheduling a formal deposition, a review period, the timeline of the board meeting. I held up one hand. What time is the board meeting? She looked at Marcus. Thursday, 9 a.m. It was Tuesday night. I went home at 6, walked Anya to school, and then slept 4 hours. I called Marcus at 10 and told him I would be at the law offices of Breyer and Mossy at 2 o'clock. He said he would have everything ready. The offices were on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, all clean lines and pale wood. A paralegal met me at the elevator and walked me to a conference room where Marcus was already seated with 2 attorneys and a stack of documents. I sat down, took off my jacket, and put my hands flat on the table. That was when Marcus went still. He was looking at my right hand, at the burn scar that ran from the base of my index finger to the inside of my wrist, a deep puckered channel of old scar tissue, ivory-colored now, 19 years healed. I had gotten it on the way out the second time, from a steel lip on a door frame that had been heated past the point of touching. He had never seen the fire. He had been 17 in another city, but he had grown up with it. He would have heard it described. He would have known about the man his father could never identify, the one who carried him out and disappeared before anyone could get a name. I watched him work it out. It took about 4 seconds. Then his jaw tightened, and he looked up at me, and I saw something shift behind his eyes. Not just surprise, but something older and quieter, like a door opening in a room he had sealed a long time ago. It was you, he said. It was a long time ago, I said. My father spent 11 years trying to find out who it was. His voice was level, but his hands were pressed flat on the table the same way mine were. He hired 2 private investigators. He had the fire marshal's report reviewed 3 times. He said he stopped. He looked at the table. He said the man had a military bearing. He said he moved like someone who had done difficult things and wasn't afraid of them. That was all he had. He found me anyway. 3 years later, apparently. He looked at the document. He never said a word about it. To me, to my mother, to anyone at the company. He just put your name in the articles and let it sit there. I thought about that. It sounded like a man who understood that some gifts don't come with a receipt, and some debts can't be paid directly. You build something. You put the right name in the right place. You trust that the world is more ordered than it looks. He was a good man, I said, though I had spent exactly 11 seconds with him conscious, none of them in conversation. But I had carried him, and you know something about a man when you carry him. Marcus nodded. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he looked at his attorney and said, let's proceed. We spent 90 minutes going through the documents. The cosigner clause was airtight. Edmund had been methodical, and the 1993 amendment had been executed and filed correctly. Steele's argument that it was a superseded artifact failed on 3 separate grounds. Marcus's lead attorney, a precise woman named Delphine Breyer, walked me through each one with the patience of someone who had done this before and was glad to do it again. I signed where they told me to sign. I initialed to the cosigner consent form, the affidavit of identity, and the notice of legal standing. Thursday morning, the board meeting lasted less than 40 minutes. Steele's attorneys raised their objection. Breyer answered it in 11 minutes. The forced transfer motion failed for want of the required consent. Steele resigned from the board before noon. 2 of his allied directors followed. The acquisition by Steelvance Group was dead. Marcus called me that afternoon. I was sleeping, so he left a message. I called him back after I walked Anya home from school. She sat at the kitchen table doing her homework while I leaned against the counter and listened to what he was offering: a minority stake in Callaway Precision, a title Chief of Special Operations, advisory capacity, a salary that would have made the night shift at the records building feel like a strange dream. I thanked him. Then I told him what I wanted instead: a consulting arrangement, no equity, a retainer, which was modest and which I named, flexible hours, specifically mornings free until 9:30. There was a pause on the line. Mornings free until 9:30, he repeated. My daughter's school is 4 blocks from my apartment, I said. I walk her every morning. Another pause, shorter this time. Done, he said. Whatever you need. Anya looked up from her homework while I was still on the phone. She had her mother's eyes and my habit of reading a room, and she could tell from the way I was standing that something had shifted. Good news, she said, in the careful voice she used when she was trying not to get her hopes up. I hung up and looked at her, the stack of books in front of her, the pencil she was turning in her fingers, the backpack hanging on the chair behind her, already loaded for tomorrow. Pretty good, I said. She went back to her homework. I put the kettle on, and the kitchen was quiet, and outside the window the street was going amber in the early evening light, the way it did every November when the sun dropped fast. I thought about Edmund Callaway in the grass, 19 years ago. I thought about a man who spent 11 years looking for a name he already knew how to honor before he found it, who built a clause into the foundation of his life's work and never mentioned it, not once, trusting that it would be there if it was needed. It had been needed. I poured 2 cups of tea, set one on the table beside Anya's notebook. Some things you do because they're right, and you ask nothing in return, and that's the whole of it. You don't keep a ledger. You don't wait for the account to balance. You just carry what needs carrying, and you set it down on the grass, and you go back to your life. But sometimes, if you built it on solid ground, the thing you carried comes back to you. Not as a debt, not as a reward, just as a door, opening,